A Green Beret was found murdered inside a highly secure American military base. Army Staff Sergeant Logan Melgar survived 2 brutal combat tours in Afghanistan. He was an expert in evasion and survival. How does a man trained to escape war zones end up dead inside a guarded fortress? His killers weren't enemy combatants. The suspects were from America's own elite special forces, Navy SEAL Team 6. These are the mythologized operators who killed Osama bin Laden and rescued Captain Phillips. Yet now the conquerors of evil were directly linked to the violent death of a Green Beret. Logan Melgar was just 34 years old when he was found dead inside a classified U.S. Special Operations compound in Bamako, Mali on June 4, 2017. The circumstances were highly suspicious from the beginning. Melgar was in peak physical health, but when doctors pronounced him dead at the local clinic, his body was covered in blood. There were signs of physical mutilation. It made no sense. To make it worse, rumors were already spreading that elite operatives from SEAL Team 6 were involved. The military desperately needed a clean story. Half a world away in Texas, 2 men in uniform knocked on Michelle Melgar's front door. She already knew it was bad news. Logan had told her he was having trouble with a few guys inside the compound and had stopped returning her text messages. She opened the door to an Army chaplain and a casualty notification officer. They claimed Logan died of natural causes. They said nothing about trouble in the base. The officer read a sterile transcript. He claimed her healthy husband suddenly fell ill. He supposedly started convulsing and vomiting blood in his sleep. She called them liars to their faces. She had spoken to Logan on a secure video call exactly 3 hours before the official time of death. He was not throwing up blood. He was perfectly fine. She stared directly at the officers. She told them someone killed Logan. They asked her who would possibly do that. Her answer? The Navy SEALs. She knew about the dark secrets, the off-the-books activities. For now, she kept those details to herself. The officers walked away confused. They simply did not believe a Green Beret could be murdered on an American military base. The truth was almost buried forever, until the medical examiner opened his throat. The natural causes narrative collapsed instantly. Melgar did not choke on his own blood. His superiors in Germany suspected foul play before they even saw the body. The autopsy proved manual strangulation. The physical signs were undeniable. Severe trauma to the neck, a fractured hyoid bone. Breaking a human hyoid bone requires immense targeted mechanical force. It is the physical equivalent of wrapping a heavy steel vice grip around a man's throat and refusing to let go. The forensic evidence left only 2 possibilities. Someone purposefully executed him, or an incredibly violent fight went horribly wrong. The Army passed the homicide case on to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Weeks passed, then Michelle finally got news. NCIS had 2 primary suspects, Petty Officer First Class Anthony Didolf and Chief Petty Officer Adam Matthews, both from SEAL Team 6. They originally claimed total innocence. They swore they walked into Melgar's room, where they found him unconscious on the mattress, and detailed a heroic rescue attempt. They claimed they performed CPR and a desperate field-expedient tracheotomy, cutting a hole into his throat to force air into his lungs. Didolf had blood all over his face. He said it spurted out of Melgar's throat while giving him mouth-to-mouth. The fractured bone destroyed that alibi. The medical evidence was overwhelming. The SEALs were trapped. They needed a new explanation. They confessed they had made the first story up. They adamantly denied murder. They called it horseplay, a harmless prank that ended in a tragic accident. Didolf said he went into Melgar's room around 5 in the morning. Matthews followed right behind him. They claimed they started messing around with hand-to-hand fighting practice. They swore they'd all been drinking heavily and things got out of hand. They claimed Matthews ended up pinning Melgar, and that's when they suddenly realized the Green Beret had stopped breathing. But what about the catastrophic neck injuries? The SEALs evolved their story again. Didolf was a former MMA fighter. Now they said that Didolf had applied a chokehold, and that is what caused the injuries. They blamed the escalation on fragile military egos. They swore it was just brothers in arms blowing off steam. Investigators almost bought the bruised ego defense. A drunken fight gone wrong was highly plausible. It fit the stereotype of aggressive operators. Then the investigators found a glaring anomaly. The SEALs claimed Melgar was drinking with them when the wrestling started. Investigators already knew Logan despised the SEALs. That alone made a friendly wrestling match highly suspicious. But there was a much bigger problem. Logan Melgar did not drink. Alcohol was strictly banned on the Bamako compound, but the SEALs drank anyway. Melgar abstained entirely. He never drank at home, let alone on deployment. The toxicology report confirmed that fact. The medical examiner found zero hint of alcohol in Melgar's system. The drunken combative's explanation looked increasingly unreliable. Why did two elite Navy SEALs lie to investigators? What were they trying to imply? Before we answer that, I have a quick favor to ask. We're a brand new channel, and taking just 1 second to hit the like and subscribe buttons makes a massive difference in helping us bring these deep dive investigations to light. And when you're down there, drop a comment letting us know exactly what true crime cases you want us to cover next. Now back to the Bamako compound where the narrative was shifting. Another Army soldier stationed at the compound stepped forward. He gave a sworn statement. He accused the Green Beret of engaging in reckless frat-like behavior. The witnesses swore he saw Melgar drinking beer on the night of his death. Military investigators immediately suspected this soldier was lying. The toxicology report proved Melgar was sober. The evidence painted a different picture. Melgar relentlessly criticized the SEALs for their toxic behavior. His wife Michelle handed investigators a trail of supporting emails. She quoted her husband verbatim, "I freaking hate them." Those emails gave investigators exactly what they needed, a motive. Investigators began digging deep into Melgar's background. He was a Green Beret engineer sergeant trained in demolitions, survival, and special operations. He was a master of unconventional warfare and special reconnaissance. He survived 2 grueling combat deployments to Afghanistan before the military transferred him to West Africa. He was smart, he was tough, he was everything the American public expected from a quiet professional. At home, he was a fiercely devoted husband and father. He had been married for 10 years on the morning he died. Michelle was sitting at home waiting for a text message. He had spoken to her a few hours earlier. He promised he would get back to her. On that particular day, there was something urgent he needed to get off his chest. He talked extensively about the daily reality of his deployment. She had the raw, inside story. She knew about life in the compound and the behavior of the other operatives. He had only arrived in Bamako in February. He had already experienced a life of madness. He told Michelle he desperately wanted to leave Mali. He witnessed things that deeply disturbed his core values. He promised to give Michelle the granular details in person. He told her he had to wait until he got home for the worst stuff. The information was simply too dangerous to discuss on a secure phone. He never made it home. Investigators discovered a terrifying reality. The Special Operations Base in Bamako was the exact opposite of what the American public imagined. The reality in Mali was total lawlessness. The operators abandoned security protocols. They repeatedly went off the compound to find local women. They got blasted on a dry base. Melgar was disgusted. He told his wife the compound operated like a degenerate frat house. He wanted no part of it. His rigid discipline created massive friction. The SEALs despised having an honest man documenting their every move. They officially banned Melgar from the operations center. They completely locked him out of his own intelligence hub. Then they took it a step further. They banned a second Green Beret from the facility. The SEALs blamed Melgar for the exile, accusing Logan of sticking his nose exactly where it did not belong. They were systematically icing out the Army personnel and taking complete control of the compound. Life in Bamako was becoming incredibly dangerous for a man who followed the rules, especially when it came to money. Investigators interviewed a direct witness. His name was strictly withheld from the public out of fear of violent retaliation. He testified that 2 SEALs despised Melgar. The witness swore that he saw Anthony Dodolph, Adam Matthews, and 2 other men approach Melgar's bedroom that night in the dark. They were holding a heavy roll of industrial duct tape. More witnesses shattered the silence. A retired senior enlisted sailor who once served in SEAL Team 6 offered a chilling explanation. He claimed Melgar uncovered a massive systemic corruption ring. He called it a highly sophisticated money-skimming syndicate. The military keeps huge stockpiles of untraceable hard currency in West Africa. Special Forces operators use this slush fund to pay local informants for actionable intelligence. Sometimes that cash simply vanishes. In Mali, a single intelligence payment can reach $20,000. The average monthly wage is barely $110. $20,000 isn't a simple payout, it is generational wealth. Many of these local informants cannot read their own native language. A SEAL operative hands the informant a dense bureaucratic document. The informant blindly signs the paper. And that's how a local signature appears on an official military receipt for $20,000. The operative actually handed the informant $500 in cash. The SEAL pockets the staggering difference. Multiplied that stolen difference by 20 separate informants over a 6-month deployment. The operatives build a massive fortune overnight. An honest soldier objecting to the theft becomes an instant liability. It appeared that Logan Melgar was uncovering a criminal enterprise led by highly trained killers. He refused to take a cut of the stolen money. These are not the kind of men you ever want to cross in a combat zone, and the military has long had a cash problem. In 2009, Hollywood conveniently ignored a critical detail when retelling the rescue of Captain Richard Phillips. They omitted the part where the ransom money vanished. Captain Phillips handed $30,000 to the Somali pirates. SEAL Team 6 breached the lifeboat and gunned down the hijackers. Captain Phillips was saved, but the cash went missing in action. Navy personnel searched the tiny boat. They only found guns and radios. The Naval Criminal Investigative Service strapped the SEALs to polygraph machines. Nothing came of the investigation. No operator was ever formally charged. For years afterward, military insiders strongly believed the SEALs pocketed the cash as a bonus. The SEAL Team 6 operators from the Phillips rescue were different men from the operators deployed to Mali. But investigators faced a horrifying institutional question. Why did an elite unit repeatedly find itself surrounded by missing operational cash? It seems Melgar decided he was going to blow the roof off the operation. He was preparing to ruin massive careers and threaten the flawless reputation of America's favorite Special Forces unit. An institutional cover-up was in motion. Operation Saving Face began. Operatives leaked explosive details directly to the intercept. Multiple sources stated Melgar reported his findings to his chain of command. He officially warned them that the two SEALs were stealing money. As reported by major media outlets, the money-skimming scheme had been operating for a long time. The illicit proceeds were allegedly spent on local prostitutes and African diamonds smuggled safely back into the United States. The operators allegedly offered to cut Melgar in on the stolen scheme. They tried to buy his absolute silence with a cut of the African diamonds and the illicit cash. He completely refused. He was an uncompromising Green Beret who viewed them as outright criminals. According to some, he began gathering the forged informant receipts. He actively documented the missing operational funds in his own intelligence ledger, and then he made a fatal move. He explicitly warned the SEALs that he was reporting the massive theft to the highest levels of their chain of command. He drew a line in the African sand. The SEALs could not buy him. They desperately needed immediate leverage. The operators needed an alternative motive to explain the 5 a.m. raid. The stolen money story carried heavy prison sentences. They offered a much less dishonorable excuse. They claimed their motivation was simple revenge. Melgar supposedly drove right past them earlier that night in his vehicle. He was returning from a party at the French embassy. He took one look at the event, deemed it too high class for his quiet tastes, and left early. The SEALs claimed they were standing drunk in the Bamako street. They stuck their hands out to flag him down for a ride back to the secure base. Melgar drove right past them and left him in the dust. The operators took it as a personal insult, and it was this perceived slight that triggered a deadly escalation. Petty Officer Anthony DeDolph and Chief Petty Officer Adam Matthews were not acting alone. They successfully recruited 2 elite Marine raiders to join the hazing plot. Gunnery Sergeant Mario Madera Rodriguez, a recipient of the American Hero Award, and Staff Sergeant Kevin Maxwell. At around 5 in the morning, the compound was dead quiet. The 4 operators did not march through the dark hallways toward Melgar's bedroom alone. They brought 2 civilians with them. One was a British expatriate whose exact role remains largely obscured. The other was a local Malian man. The 6 crept toward the bedroom. Melgar was fast asleep inside. The plan was to aggressively scare the life out of him. They brought a massive steel sledgehammer to beat down his locked door. They brought a heavy roll of industrial duct tape to strap Melgar down to the mattress, and they brought a portable speaker. Investigators reviewed these specific details very differently. A 4-man raid team carrying sledgehammers and heavy bindings is too extreme for a friendly prank, but the speaker revealed their true terrifying intent. They placed it in the hallway and cranked the music up to maximum volume. They were actively trying to muffle the sounds of what would happen next. Melgar awoke to the sound of a sledgehammer knocking the heavy wooden door inward off its hinges. He had zero time to comprehend the terrifying situation, but he didn't freeze. He was a highly trained Green Beret, and his survival instincts instantly took over. He fought for his life. Didolf launched himself over the mattress and landed directly on top of him. Melgar thrashed wildly in the dark, the blaring music drowning out the chaos of the violent struggle. The three other operators swarmed the bed and aggressively wrapped Melgar's kicking legs with the industrial tape to neutralize his raw strength. Didolf panicked. The extortion raid was rapidly falling apart. To overcompensate for the Green Beret's resistance, he locked his arms tightly around Melgar's neck. He applied a professional rear-naked chokehold. Chokeholds function as a blood choke. They should not be lethal if the attacker releases the pressure quickly enough. Hold the tight grip for too many seconds and the brain dies. The final result is permanent. And that is exactly what happened to Logan Melgar. The raid team insisted they never intended to murder. They said their only objective was to humiliate him. They fully admitted they meticulously planned to have the local Malian man assault Melgar on camera while he was bound. One of the men was explicitly ordered to film the horrifying ordeal on his personal cell phone. If a military judge saw that video, or if the physical assault was proven, these national heroes faced catastrophic consequences. They faced mandatory permanent placement on the sex offenders registry and life in Leavenworth. They had to bury the truth. The men claimed they were only going to use the illicit video to openly shame Melgar. They claimed they planned to show him the footage the next morning as payback for ignoring them in the street. A naked extortion video is the ultimate insurance policy, and investigators suspected blackmail. In the hyper-masculine, rigidly disciplined world of special forces, a sexual scandal destroys a military career. It annihilates a soldier's credibility. If Logan Melgar went to the Pentagon brass to report the massive slush fund theft, the SEALs would simply leak the video. The military would dismiss Melgar as a disgraced, disgruntled operator trying to deflect from his own horrifying scandal. It was the perfect psychological trap. But a dead man cannot be blackmailed. Investigators ultimately did not pursue the case as a premeditated murder plot. They pointed to the frantic medical response when Didolf refused to break the chokehold and Melgar died on the mattress. Every man in that room swore that the video was not designed to force his silence. They admitted they decided to punish him. They never denied that they actively tried to film an American hero in a compromising position. The raid never progressed to actual humiliation because Melgar was dead. The operators panicked. They initiated rapid CPR. They grabbed a heavy defibrillator to shock his chest and desperately performed a crude field tracheotomy to force an airway straight through his ruined throat, but nothing worked. But seasoned investigators took a look at that bloody hole in his neck and suspected something entirely different. They theorized that the tracheotomy was not a desperate medical procedure as claimed. The SEALs were already covered in Melgar's blood from the violent physical struggle. They desperately needed a medical excuse for why they looked like butchers. Investigators suspected that cutting a jagged incision directly through his windpipe temporarily masked the violent bruising from the chokehold. It gave them the perfect alibi for gore on their hands. The medical examiner in Germany took one look at the jagged incision and destroyed their alibi. The cut was made post-mortem. A living human bleeds profusely from a throat wound. A corpse does not. They had taken a blade to a dead man's neck simply to build a legal defense. What happened next defies human empathy. They did not immediately call for an emergency medical evacuation. They did not trigger the compound alarms to save their brother in arms. The elite operators sat inside that locked bedroom with the murdered corpse of an American soldier for hours as his body went cold, and they used that critical time to orchestrate a flawless cover-up. First, they purged the liabilities. The British man and the paid Malian accomplice were ordered to walk away in the dark. They slipped off the compound and never faced a single charge. How did two foreign civilians casually walk away from the murder of an American hero? Pursuing them meant publicly admitting to the host country that Navy SEALs were smuggling locals onto a classified base to help with an extortion plot. To avoid an international incident, the Pentagon let the accomplices vanish. Second, they sanitized the crime scene. The SEALs executed a frantic cleanup routine. They wiped away the physical evidence of the struggle and disposed of the illicit alcohol. Standing over Melgar's dead body, the two SEALs explicitly agreed to take the sole blame to protect the Marine raiders. But they had one massive physical problem that they could not wipe away with bleach. The bedroom door was destroyed. They invented a brilliant tactical lie to explain the shattered wood. Only after the scene was perfectly staged and the civilians were gone did they finally unlock the door and call for the base security officer. When the officer arrived, the SEALs pointed to the broken hinges. They said they heard him choking through the door, and they were forced to physically break into his locked room with a sledgehammer to save his life. An assistant regional security officer viewed the body. He brought Staff Sergeant Mario Madera Rodriguez with him as a witness. The security officer had no idea the Marine standing next to him had helped execute the violent crime hours earlier. Melgar was transported to the local clinic. Adam Matthews stood in the medical room with blood covering his hands. Didolf was pacing the clinic floor in an obvious state of psychological shock. Madera Rodriguez sent a frantic text message to a woman in the city, typing that Didolf was entirely out of his mind. If the SEALs successfully sanitized the crime scene, how did investigators find out about the duct tape, the sledgehammer, and the extortion plot? The answer is paranoia and betrayal. Special Operations is a tight-knit community. Whispers of the 5 a.m. raid spread through the barracks. When NCIS agents arrived, they separated the men into isolated interrogation rooms and squeezed them. The SEALs had originally promised to protect the Marine raiders, but as the pressure mounted and the forensic evidence destroyed their alibis, the SEALs panicked. They secretly tried to shift the blame onto the Marines. The Marines realized quickly that they were being set up to take the fall for a Navy SEAL's botched chokehold. The Brotherhood instantly evaporated. To save themselves from life in prison, the Marines cracked. They turned on the SEALs and blew the lid off the entire operation. The media erupted. Was the hyper-aggressive culture inside SEAL Team 6 too toxic? The specific narrative was not new. 5 years prior to the Bamako murder, operators from SEAL Team 2 were formally investigated for severely abusing detainees in Afghanistan. The abuse was barbaric. They stomped on the bound men's faces. They dropped heavy stones onto their exposed chests. One of those Afghan detainees later died. An active-duty Army soldier officially reported the incident. It sparked immediate institutional friction between standard Army personnel and the elite Navy SEALs. Several Army Special Forces commanders openly stated the SEALs needed to be put on a very tight leash. Soldiers sometimes lose control under extreme stress. The SEALs were officially accused of operating without any ethical boundaries. The standard Army narrative firmly established that SEALs genuinely believed they were untouchable. They acted exactly like the rock stars of the modern military. Culturally, they were an entirely different breed of soldier. The prevailing story going around the Pentagon was that Green Berets prized deep intellect over raw brawn. They actively learned to respect their operational environment. The Navy SEALs operated entirely differently. They were about unrelenting speed and maximum aggression. They went in hard and they went out fast. They left the fires of pure chaos burning brightly behind them. That God complex was the root of the entire Bamako tragedy. And then came the Mali deployment. A Green Beret was dead on a highly secure compound. The internal military tension reached a breaking point. The usual dark rumors circulated around the Pentagon again. SEALs aggressively stealing operational money. SEALs trafficking illegal hard drugs to fund their lifestyles. Now they were sitting dead center of a homicide investigation. The Pentagon was already in full-blown crisis mode. The military didn't just lie to Michelle Melgar. They lied to the entire country. For 5 agonizing months, the Pentagon kept Logan Melgar's homicide a secret from the American public. There was no press release. There was no news conference. It appeared that they had buried the murder of an American hero to protect the pristine brand of SEAL Team 6. It wasn't until late 2017, when investigative journalists finally blew the lid off the story, that the Pentagon was forced to admit a Green Beret had been strangled to death on their own base. For United States Africa Command, the year 2017 was an institutional bloodbath. A few months after the Bamako murder, 4 elite American operatives were killed in Niger. They were ambushed during a classified counterterrorism mission. It was an absolute massacre in the desert. 4 dead American heroes, 4 dead Nigerian military assets. They managed to kill at least 21 armed militants belonging directly to the Islamic State before they were overrun. The military blatantly lied to the public. They initially reported the deadly ambush as a standard reconnaissance patrol. A later congressional report explicitly stated the Special Forces team was entirely unprepared. The entire shadow war was suddenly exposed, And with the Logan Melgar murder investigation sitting directly on top of it, the Department of Defense was suffocating under its own scandals. The 4 Bamako operators faced absolute ruin. They stared down a long list of charges under the military justice system, including felony murder and violent hazing. The military banned all forms of internal hazing following historic tragedies. Deadly hazing was traditionally reserved for absolute amateurs and basic boot camp. It did not happen at the very apex of the entire military. It did not happen inside the best trained special forces units on Earth. The trial began to look like a massive PR illusion. Chief Petty Officer Adam Matthews eventually broke under the pressure. He stood before a military judge and delivered a sickening PR-scripted apology. He cried in the courtroom. He claimed that he was tormented by his complacency. He actually told the judge he failed to help his teammates when they required proper guidance. Then the man who just preached about moral guidance threw his own team directly under the bus to secure a plea deal. He claimed Adolph and Madero Rodriguez hatched the extortion plan completely alone. The sheer disparity of the military justice system was on full display. If a civilian broke into a locked bedroom with a sledgehammer, duct tape, and a camera, and a man choked to death during the raid, they would die in a federal supermax prison for felony murder. But the Pentagon had a massive classified problem. If these operators went to a full public court-martial, they would not go down quietly. In the intelligence community, it is called gray mail. Their defense attorneys would aggressively subpoena the classified intelligence ledgers. They would expose the multi-million-dollar West African slush fund to the global media. The military could not afford a public trial. The military handed Adam Matthews a 1-year slap on the wrist for actively participating in the execution of a Green Beret. The plea deal served a highly specific purpose. It was institutional hush money to protect the brand. Kevin Maxwell was formally convicted of negligent homicide and obstruction of justice. He received 4 years behind bars. Anthony Adolph was the center of the murder. His hands squeezed the life out of an American hero. Fracturing a hyoid bone requires immense sustained pressure. It proves Adolph held the chokehold long past the point of basic physical incapacitation. Adolph took a massive plea deal. He received 10 years in detention for involuntary manslaughter and hazing. He stood in court and justified the murder. He claimed that elite killers were physically scared as they drunkenly walked down the dark street. The prosecution pushed back hard. They called the chokehold inherently dangerous. Mario Madero Rodriguez completely refused to accept a plea agreement. He admitted he helped break into Melgar's bedroom, but insisted his only role was playing loud music to cover the assault. He fought the case to the bitter end. He somehow received the absolute lightest sentence of all 4 operators, just 90 days of hard labor and 6 months confinement. The case refused to completely die, though. The explosive allegations of systemic financial misconduct were entirely unresolved. And there was one horrifying legal twist that threatened to expose the chain of command. Matthews and Maxwell dropped a legal bomb. They claimed Adolph actually asked for prior permission to execute the raid directly from Green Beret Sergeant First Class Jamie Morris. He was Logan Melgar's direct military supervisor on the compound. If this was true, it complicated everything. Why would a commanding boss greenlight a violent hazing hit against his own subordinate? Was Morris completely in on the Money-Skimming Syndicate? Adolph denied permission was ever granted. Morris was never formally charged, but the massive public controversy forced him to retire early. Witnesses testified under oath about the physical stealing occurring inside the wire, but the multi-million-dollar money-skimming scheme was entirely buried by the military bureaucracy. It has never been legally proven in a court of law. Here is perhaps the most infuriating detail of the entire cover-up. In January 2019, Adam Matthews attended a massive costume party in Las Vegas. He had not even faced his formal court-martial yet. He was actively awaiting trial for the execution of a Green Beret, and he was out partying in a casino. He spotted somebody across the crowded floor, Logan Melgar's widow. Michelle was simply trying to survive her crushing public grief. Instead of walking away out of shame, Matthews marched straight up to her. The sick irony of his outfit was intentional. Matthews approached the grieving widow wearing a full camouflage Rambo costume. Rambo was historically a Green Beret. This SEAL was wearing the exact uniform of the man he helped choke to death. Masking his true identity, he told the widow to call him Mike. The operator flirted aggressively and successfully secured her personal phone number. Leaning in closely over the loud casino music, He confidently whispered that every single man inside that locked Bamako bedroom was actually a really good guy caught in a bad situation. He promised her absolutely nobody would ever try to murder her husband. Standing face to face with the grieving widow, he actively justified his own homicide. The next day, his audacity reached a new level when he asked to go to her room. He sent the grieving widow a text message that read, "Can I come nap? I'm dying." She declined. An active-duty Green Beret attending the Vegas event realized exactly what was happening. He intercepted the situation and texted the SEAL directly. He ordered Matthews to permanently lose her phone number. He called his behavior a black mark on the SEAL community and finished the text message with a blunt, chilling threat: "Do not contact her again. Actions have consequences." Matthews completely ignored the warning. He texted the widow again, begging her to sit down somewhere private. He desperately tried to gaslight her, messaging her that the encounter was an unbelievable coincidence and offering a fake apology. Michelle immediately blocked his number. She contacted the federal investigators and asked for the official booking photographs of the men standing trial for Logan's murder. She stared directly at the photograph of Adam Matthews. She told federal agents that that was the exact man who tried to get into her hotel room. The military was humiliated again. Matthews was incredibly lucky his behavior did not permanently derail his highly favorable plea agreement. United States Special Operations Command frantically scrambled to clear its ruined public image. They denied their operators would act with utter recklessness and complete impunity. But for the American public, a terrifying question remained unanswered. Did Logan Melgar actually uncover a massive criminal syndicate his own teammates desperately wanted to control with an extortion tape? We may never get the full truth, but we do know exactly how the military justice system handled his killers. Chief Petty Officer Adam Matthews served his single year and walked free. Staff Sergeant Kevin Maxwell finished his short sentence. Mario Madera Rodriguez served his 6 months. But the most insulting legal twist was saved for Anthony Didolph. The Navy SEAL whose bare hands physically choked the life out of an American hero was originally sentenced to 10 years in military prison. However, he did not serve his full time. He was quietly granted an early release and walked out from behind bars. Today, every single man involved in the violent Sledgehammer Raid and the calculated cover-up is back in civilian society, while Logan Melgar rests in Arlington National Cemetery. Elite operators act with terrifying impunity when the public stops watching. But classified military bases aren't the only places where sworn protectors use their uniforms to hide a sinister double life. Back on American soil, a veteran LAPD officer named William Leisure secretly ran a brutal crime ring right in the heart of Los Angeles. To see exactly how Mild Bill became one of the most ruthless hitmen in true crime history, click the video on your screen right now.